As a business analyst, I can leverage the workflow designer screen to create wizards for users and simplify their jobs and automate business processes. A workflow is made up of a sequence of steps, and for each step you can ask a question like, what is your first name? What is your last name? If you want to have a particular answer be required, you set the required flag. A step can be cancellation points, beyond which a reason code is required. Things like phone and email, where you want to make sure that it's entered properly and captured correctly. I can specify where to store that particular data. So here's the table, and here's the column name, here's the control type that I want to display in the UI. And I can also specify a validation to execute when the data is entered. So this is managed as regular expressions, which are pretty standard and pretty straightforward to understand. Now, workflows can be created on the fly, and they can be done using a very simple drag and drop metaphor. So I can start with a blank container and then just drag and drop from my toolbox onto my workflow. And then for each step, I can associate an existing workflow, and that can save me a lot of time. For example, creating contact workflow, I just want to use that as my step number one. Step two, I'm going to go ahead and say create place. And then step three, I'm going to leverage my create RMA workflow. So I can reuse these things like Legos and piece them together to make a very creative workflow that eliminates a lot of user errors and prevents any redundancy in creating the workflows from scratch. Now, I also can do different kinds of steps. For example, I can have a screen step, and all I need to do is specify the screen name, and then in the workflow that's executed, the actual screen will be displayed to the user in the workflow as part of the wizard navigation. Once I have a workflow that I like and that I feel is completed, then of course I'm going to do some runs of that, run through it and simulate that and make sure that it works the way that I want it to. And once I'm happy with that, then I can go ahead and publish that. Workflows can be executed in a number of different ways. They can be just drop-downs on the menu, for example, the RMA add workflow. They can be associated to existing buttons, or I can create specific workflow buttons. I can execute them off of business rules that are triggered. And this example, just from a workflow button, would be associating the workflow using the editor here, and I'm going to enter the workflow that we just created and then give it a name. New call script. So it's very fluid and flexible, and I can save that pattern and I can import and export it and share it with my peers.